What if I told you one of the greatest villain downfalls in fiction came from a teenager with a notebook? Not a superhuman dictator, not a god-tier superhero, not a man who could laser people in half with his eyes, but a student. Today, we're comparing two of the most iconic modern antagonists, Light Yagami from Death Note and Homelander from The Boys. And while both characters are narcissistic, manipulative, and completely corrupted by power, there's one major difference between them. Light's downfall feels tragic, psychological, and earned, while Homelander's downfall, at least so far, feels loud, repetitive, and sometimes even cartoonish. And before anyone gets angry in the comments, this isn't me saying Homelander is a bad character. Anthony Starr's performance is incredible. Homelander is terrifying. He steals almost every scene he's in. But when you compare the actual writing behind their declines as characters, Death Note handled its villain far more intelligently. Let's talk about it. First, we need to understand why Light Yagami works so well as an antagonist. Light didn't start as a monster, and that's important. He starts as an intelligent but bored student who genuinely believes the world is rotten. Then he finds the Death Note, a notebook that allows him to kill anyone whose name he writes in it, and slowly, power corrupts him. But the genius of Death Note is that Light's transformation happens in stages. At first, you can almost understand him. He targets criminals. He talks about creating a better world. He convinces himself he's justice. But every decision he makes slowly chips away at his humanity. And the scary part is that Light never notices. That's what makes his downfall so compelling. The audience watches someone who believes he's becoming a god while he's actually becoming less human with every episode. Now compare that to Homelander. Homelander is introduced as unstable almost immediately. He's already broken, already narcissistic, already terrifying, which works for The Boys because the show is a satire of celebrity culture, corporate greed, and political extremism. But because Homelander starts near the top psychologically, there's less room for transformation, and the tension mostly comes from waiting to see when he finally snaps. After a while, that structure becomes repetitive. Every season gives us another variation of Homelander is angry. Homelander feels insecure. Homelander humiliates someone. Homelander kills someone. Everyone is scared of Homelander. It's entertaining, but it's not evolving in the same way Light's story evolved. Light's downfall is built like a Greek tragedy, while Homelander's is built like a ticking time bomb. And tragedy is usually more emotionally satisfying than pure chaos. Another reason Light's ending hits harder is because Death Note strips away his image piece by piece. For most of the series, Light controls everything. He manipulates the police, manipulates Misa, manipulates his own father, even manipulates himself at one point. He always has another plan, another trick, another backup strategy, and you start believing Light is untouchable, which is exactly why the finale works so well. Because in the final confrontation, the mask finally breaks. Nier exposes him, his allies turn against him, and for the first time in the entire series, Light panics. Not calmly, not strategically. He completely falls apart. He screams, begs, denies everything, tries desperately to kill Nier even after being exposed. And suddenly, the godlike figure we followed for dozens of episodes becomes exactly what he truly was underneath it all, a terrified human being. That moment is powerful because Death Note understood something crucial. A villain's downfall should expose the truth about who they really are. Light claimed he was justice, but in the end, he was just a narcissist addicted to power. And the anime doesn't glorify him in his final moments either, especially in the anime version. The scene where Light runs through the abandoned warehouse area while bleeding out is honestly haunting. He sees visions of his younger self. The music becomes tragic, and for a brief moment, you remember who he used to be before the Death Note corrupted him. It's not just the fall of a villain, it's the death of potential. Now compare that emotional complexity to Homelander. Homelander absolutely has human moments. The show occasionally explores his loneliness, his childhood trauma, and his desperate need for love. But The Boys often undercuts its own emotional depth with shock humor, satire, or excessive brutality. Sometimes it feels less interested in psychologically dissecting Homelander and more interested in embarrassing him. And there's a difference. Humiliation is not the same thing as tragedy. A character being pathetic can work, but if overused, it starts feeling repetitive instead of meaningful. That's why some people felt Homelander's recent scenes crossed into being almost too cartoonish. Not because he deserved better. Morally, he absolutely didn't. But because great villain endings usually balance punishment with emotional weight, and Death Note understood that balance. Light's ending is satisfying because it punishes him while also forcing the audience to reflect on everything he became, whereas Homelander's arc sometimes feels like the writers are screaming, "Look how awful this guy is." We already know he's awful. The more interesting question is what is underneath the monster, and sometimes The Boys answers that brilliantly. Other times, it settles for spectacle. Another huge difference is how both stories treat intelligence. Death Note is fundamentally a battle of ideology and strategy. Every victory feels earned through manipulation, deduction, and psychological warfare. And when Light loses, it feels believable because the story spends so much time showing the cracks in his arrogance. His downfall comes from the exact flaw that defined him, his God complex. He genuinely believed he could never be wrong, and that's poetic writing. Homelander, on the other hand, often survives because nobody can physically stop him. So the conflict is more about fear than intellect, which means his eventual defeat will probably depend on overpowering him emotionally, politically, or physically. But with Light, the defeat already happened psychologically before it happened physically. The second Nier exposed him, Kira died. Everything after that was just the collapse. And honestly, that final breakdown scene from Death Note is still one of the greatest villain crashes in anime history, because the audience isn't just watching Light lose. We're watching Delusion die in real time, and that's terrifying. In the end, both characters are fantastic for different reasons. Homelander represents unchecked power in a celebrity-driven society, a living weapon created by corporate corruption and public worship. Light represents intellectual arrogance, the danger of believing you alone deserve control over morality and justice. But when it comes to whose downfall was more compelling, I think Death Note wins easily. Because Light's ending wasn't just shocking. It was tragic, psychological, symbolic, and deeply human. Homelander makes you uncomfortable. Light makes you reflect. And personally, that's the kind of villain writing that stays with me longer. But let me know what you think. Was Light's downfall better, or do you think Homelander's story hits harder? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos on movies, anime, comics, and storytelling.